Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to review the Trent Horn versus Destiny debate that was on whatever just a couple days ago. And I'm doing this because it was on a very interesting topic and relevant to today of induced abortions. The basic idea is Destiny, I believe, is an atheist who has the opinion that a person doesn't have personhood status prior to 20 weeks of pregnancy, and therefore that person can be subject to all sorts of things, such as they could be sex dolls, people can harvest their organs, all that sort of thing. And it sounds very shocking, what I'm just saying right here, but we're going to listen to the portion of the debate that I think was the most fantastic on this particular topic. So what Trent does is Trent believes, he's a Catholic, and he believes that all human life begins at conception or fertilization. In prior times, I've posted videos that have shown that 95% of biologists agree that human life begins at conception. And I think that simplifies things. When you say a soul is a soul is a soul that begins at conception, then it really clarifies your views on abortion, on induced abortion, the intentional killing of an unborn child. So here we go. Let's listen to this opinion now. The other thing just to mention with Destiny is he is a moral anti-realist. What does that mean? Anti-realism is a belief that everything is the subject. We have no objective moral values. Everything is subjective and based on a person's opinion. And you can see when you have that kind of a view, how that clouds the windows into your mind with some of the views that come with that. We believe in moral realism. As Christians, we believe we have an objective moral standard of truth, and that truth is Jesus Christ. And so that's the belief. That's what guides us. We discover our morals as we travel through time. Our morals are a function of our reasoning and our intuitions, but also our conscience. We're told in Romans 2:15 that we have a conscience, and God implanted that in us to tell us what's right and what's wrong. And you can tell how that works because when people try to justify the induced abortions of little human beings, what they'll do is they'll try to say that the human beings aren't human. That's really what they'll do. Or they'll say that they're not persons or any of that kind of stuff. So let's listen to the most interesting part of this debate, and you can let me know what you think about it.
We'll say is, all right, here's moral issue X. Mm-hmm. You have your view, I have my view. And we critique, and a lot of the ways we critique each other's views is your view leads to these crazy consequences. Yeah, but your view leads to crazy consequences. So then
I just want to point out the basis of this particular ethical framework is consequentialism. And sometimes that goes into utilitarianism, which says that you want to maximize the greatest value for the greatest number of people. Consequentialism focuses on the consequence and whether it causes good or something of value or pleasure, or whether it causes harm. And so when you focus on the consequence, sometimes you can have poor ethical reasoning if only the consequence is what guides you and you're not looking at another perspective, which would be your moral duties to do what's good and what's right. And we all have these objective moral duties, and that is the idea of deontological ethics. But I digress. Here we go.
And then we kind of say, okay, whose view leads to kind of less crazy consequences? And that may be the more reasonable view we ought to hold. I think that happens a lot in moral discourse.
Yeah.
So your view then would be this. And then I'll talk about the consequences, and I'll talk about just the overall, what I think is wrong with the view. That a person exists when you lose the immediate ability to be conscious. I guess when you permanently lose it, like if you're in a persistent vegetative state permanently, you're no longer a person. When you lose consciousness, you're not a person anymore, when you lose it permanently. So you start to be a person when you gain it. Prior to 20 weeks, there is no person, there's no one there with a right to life in the fetus. Correct? Your view? So I have a few questions then. Would it be wrong to cause a healthy fetus to become permanently unconscious?
No.
Okay. So would it be wrong to cause this permanent unconsciousness to use, let's say you could keep growing the fetus into an older body, to use it for organ harvesting, maybe as a kind of sex doll even?
As long as it never became conscious or didn't have the faculty?
Never became conscious.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Did you hear what he just said? It's perfectly fine if you have an unconscious fetus forming in the womb to use it as a sex doll or organ harvest. This is morally atrocious. This is something that I think that most humans should agree is completely wrong. And when I say most humans should agree, it's because we should follow our ethical framework, our conscience. So in this debate, they talk a lot about your moral intuitions. But what they didn't get into so much is Christian synderesis. It's the idea that we have a conscience. And sometimes our conscience isn't in complete alignment with our intuitions. I've used this example before, but imagine if you have a little person standing at the edge of a pond, and an alligator goes to pull that person into the pond. Your intuitions are to run, get away from the alligator, and save yourself. But your conscience tells you you need to go into that pond and save that little child. So here we go.
Related question, but we'll circle back soon. What are your thoughts on fake child pornography using AI or virtual images?
Fake child pornography. I'm not going to have a strong opinion on the action itself. It's going to be consequential in nature in terms of like what are the impacts of doing it. So say you create a bunch and people stop actually abusing children, I'd probably be in favor of it. Say you create a bunch and it leads to an increased harm of children, I'd probably oppose to it.
You have a practical objection, not an in principle objection.
No, that wouldn't be like, no. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an in principle objection. I think, unfortunately, if you use that sort of a thing, it's very likely to lead to some harmful actions on real humans. It's likely to be very problematic. I think porn itself is a huge problem in our society. And unfortunately, it's led to quite a few things like child sex trafficking and other things.
Okay. So then it circles back. So let's say we had people who took fetuses, made them permanently unconscious, and made them infant, toddler, or child sex dolls. So we have, unconscious infants and toddlers. They were never conscious. They're used as child sex dolls. Your only objection to that practice would be if it caused more pedophilia among other conscious children.
Yeah, because I would say there's no person is being harmed there.
Okay. So child sex dolls could be on the table. Okay.
Kind of, although I would fight the framing of this because child is intuition pumping the idea that it's a fully formed, developed human, and I would never call a brainless thing a child.
Yes. So then I would say human
body lacking a brain. I would say you can do whatever you want with it.
A biological human organism that proceeds through the child stages.
Sure.
That is never conscious.
Sure.
There we go. All right. Would it be wrong to kill a newborn who has never been conscious?
Assuming it lacked the ability to be conscious, sure. It's not, or you can kill it. There's nothing to kill. You could end the existence of whatever that is. Yes.
Well, suppose it didn't permanently lack the ability. If we gave it drugs or something like that, or maybe it'll naturally come out of it in a few months.
When you say come out of it, we start to get into an area where you're like kind of disintegrating my concept of consciousness. So I consider conscious experience to be an emergent property of the underlying structures of the brain communicating with each other. So if you're telling me, what if you had all the underlying structures, but you didn't have that conscious experience? It's a really hard one for me to conceptualize.
Let's just say the structures still have to develop, I guess.
Sure, then it's an undeveloped. Yeah, then I would say it's free game for whatever.
Yeah. For example, I think this came up a little bit in your dialogue with Lila. You have an anencephalic child who doesn't have an upper brain, someone like Jackson Buell.
Yeah.
People can look that up online. Doctors said he'll probably die. Most anencephalic children, the upper brain does not develop. So the neural tube fails to close. So you just have a lower brain. And Jackson lived to be about 5. Now, his parents claimed that he did exhibit signs of consciousness. Some other people might debate that. I don't know. But you would say that if a newborn didn't, never develop consciousness. I mean, I guess it's like a fetus and never developed it. The structures haven't developed yet in the brain. Okay. Here's one that'd be interesting. Suppose we had a drug that could, so take the anencephaly case. Normally, if you don't grow if your brain consciousness doesn't develop, it's never going to develop. Suppose we had a drug in the future that could allow an anencephalic fetus to develop consciousness. But if we don't give it the drug, it'll never be conscious. Does that human fetus, that human being, biological human being, would they have a right to that treatment?
I don't think they would have any rights yet, because rights, I would say, are only afforded to persons. I don't think
Okay.
fetuses are afforded any rights. So no, it would not have a right to it. No.
So even if we have
This is when you say the idea of intrinsic value of all humans. We believe that we have intrinsic value, that humans have an intrinsic value. It's in our Constitution, in our Declaration. It's a very important thing that all humans are endowed by God to have basic human rights. So what happens is people try to skate around that by claiming that the unborn child who's under 20 weeks, who is not conscious, is they won't say a non-human, but they'll say non-person because they want to get past the idea that all humans are supposed to be justified to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that this has been endowed by our Creator, and it is a moral axiom. It's a fact. And it's also something that's in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So we see this idea. We have the question of does society have certain obligations to value all humans, to treat humans with dignity and to treat them as if they're of value and that they were given intrinsic value? And we believe yes. And in fact, can we say that this is a universal idea? Well, we can say that some societies do vary from that, and some societies are rather warped. But we know that when we have surveys like the Globe study of 62 societies, that in every single country, people realize they have moral obligations to be what they call humane orientation. That everyone should be humane to other members of society, other people, and also humane to animals and other life forms on this planet. That is in every single country. People realize that was the moral ought. And it was higher levels than the is or the practices in that country. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that we have these universal basic obligations, and that is found in studies. And so you might have individuals who disagree with these universal obligations, but that doesn't mean the universal obligations do not exist. For example, Johnny might disagree with the mathematics in a mathematics textbook, but it doesn't mean that mathematics does not exist. And so let's go on.
We had a newborn
Correct.
who could be conscious if we gave them medicine. They don't have any kind of right to that treatment.
No.
And I guess
although again, I would fight on the optics framing, because when you say newborn, we're intuition pumping a normal, healthy 9-month fetus that's now delivered. But I would fight that whatever you're describing is a very inhuman.
It is a newly born human being.
Right.
It is a newly born human being with a congenital cerebral defect.
Okay.
And we could give this human being medication for them to have a normal and healthy life. But you're saying this human being would have no right to it. And I guess their parents wouldn't have a right to say this child ought to be treated any more than somebody who has a dog that's injured would have a right to similar treatment.
I mean, you have a right to treat your animals, right?
But the question of whether we as a human society will treat this infant will be similar.
Is there some moral compulsion on like a healthcare system to provide emergency services or something?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would say no.
Okay. So not.
I like the seriousness of this particular interview. I found it rather amusing. One distinction that Trent pointed out later on in the interview was that between the wanted unborn child and the unwanted one, or unborn human being, however you want to phrase it, but the value that the parents place on whether or not the child should be valued. If you have the position that you don't think that the human being is of any value prior to 20 weeks and that you can do anything with that human being that you desire, so long as it doesn't harm you, you can see where the moral atrocities can come in with that particular type of a view. Just because a human being is unwanted does not mean it does not have intrinsic value. And I think that's a really important thing that just needs to be pointed out. So I want to thank everybody for coming in here today. Please like, subscribe, and do come again if you like this kind of content. I listened to this interview and I found it fascinating. And I also would recommend going to it. I'm going to link it in the chat so you can go watch the full interview on whatever. And also I want to point out that I also listened to Pints with Aquinas and the review. I listened to part of that. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but I listened to on Pints with Aquinas where Matt Fradd was interviewing Trent about this particular debate. They talked about the fact that going up against Destiny is very difficult, and it would be very difficult to do because Destiny speaks quickly, he debates well, he has an understanding of philosophy, he has pretty good knowledge of a lot of different topics. And so Matt Fradd said that 98% of people would not or should not probably debate Destiny. So I probably would not debate Destiny. I don't think that would be a good idea because I have not been trained in debating. I would rather have a conversation with somebody, which was the format for this particular interaction, these interactions. And so I do think that's a better format, but it can be challenging if you go to watch a debate or a conversation when you're up against somebody who has the moral anti-realist position, when they deny that we have objective morality and that we have a source of objective morality. So that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I see Tangelo has a new book out. I just wanted to mention that. He says he's got a book and we are going to review it on this channel, the RNA DNA Nexus. He says it's called, let's see, let me get the title here exactly. Unveiling Fine-Tuning in Life's Molecular Machinery at the Atomic Scale and the Paradigm of Intelligent Design. Very fascinating. Now, my specialization is certainly not in science, but I'm going to take a look at the book and see if we can talk it over with Otangelo on my channel as soon as I get through the book. He's sending me a free copy, very generous of him, so I'll be able to do that. And so also I recommend everyone take a look at Otangelo's book, or at least watch the video where we review it, and you can decide if you want to go buy the book. And it's probably a really good book. It looks like it's on a fascinating topic. I recently looked at James Tour debate, and I reviewed that on my channel. Kind of similar related ideas in some ways with talking about the source of our design. And we'll get into that, and we'll try to see if we can make it in an easy to understand form for everyone. So thank you for coming in today. Please like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.